Thank you, Anthony, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alan Potter. I'm a senior partner at BPP Consulting, and we're the specialist consultants that were commissioned by the West London planning authorities to provide technical support in the production of the updated West London Waste Plan. Today, I'll run through the following items: an introduction to the plan, an explanation of the current position, then an explanation of the contents of the updated West London Waste Plan, and conclude with explaining how you have the opportunity to influence the contents of that plan. So, introduction. First of all, waste local plans form part of the development plan for a particular area. They guide development based on local priorities and needs. The law requires that applications for planning permission be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And so any planning applications for waste-related development will be assessed against the contents of currently the extant waste local plan that's in place primarily. And so development really only happens if planning permission is granted, and planning permission is normally granted by the local planning authority, which assesses each planning application against relevant development plan policies. We prepared this slide to just explain or show how the development plan stands within the context of other planning and waste related policy documents. So you can see hopefully in the centre here we have what's called the development plan for waste in West London. We have the West London Waste Plan. We also have local plans and adopted neighbourhood plans. So these are plans that relate to non-waste development within each of the West London boroughs and also the OPDC mayoral development corporation. And then we also have that within the context of the London plan, which is the regional plan that sets the sort of overall framework for planning in London as a whole. We also have other guidance documents that are produced partly by the Greater London Authority, London Planning Guidance. We also have the London Environment Strategy. And then we also have the Joint Municipal Waste Management Strategy. So really the update to the West London Waste Plan has been prepared in the wider policy context, which is set out in that graphic. It includes national policy as well. We have the National Planning Policy Framework, the National Planning Policy for Waste, National Planning Practice Guidance, and the Waste Management Plan for England. Plus, we've got the policy adopted for London, as I explained, and the local plans prepared by each local planning authority, which are party to the Joint Waste Plan. Together with those local plans and the London plan, the West London Waste Plan forms that development plan against which proposals for planning permission for waste-related development in West London is assessed. Just as a side note on what might be referred to as WLWA, the West London Waste Authority, or West London Waste as it's generally referred to. This is the Joint Waste Disposal Authority that's responsible for arranging for the management of household waste produced in West London. And this household waste forms part of the overall amount of waste that needs to be provided for. So this slide sets out the types of waste to be planned for, and this is 8 waste streams are identified in the National Planning Policy for Waste that each local authority with responsibility for waste planning in England, known as waste planning authorities, are responsible for assessing the need to provide for waste management capacity. The management needs for most of the waste streams are addressed in the local London plan, which has been used to guide the development of the updated West London Waste Plan. Perhaps the most significant is the allocation of specific tonnages of what we refer to as HIC waste, which is household, industrial and commercial waste, to each London borough to ensure that, on the whole, sufficient suitable capacity is provided for London to be net self-sufficient when it comes to waste management. I'll be addressing that in more detail, but just briefly run through this slide as well. So you can see that there's construction demolition waste as well, which is subject to net self-sufficiency and London Plan management targets. You've got hazardous waste, we've got excavation waste, which aren't expected to be sufficient capacity to deal with everything within London. We've got agricultural waste and low-level radioactive waste, which arise in small amounts. And then we have wastewater, which provision is primarily planned for through the water utility company's asset management plan process. And for those of you who may not be familiar with what waste management facilities are, the slide shows just some examples. So we've got, whilst waste collection is one of the council's most visible services, facilities where our waste ends up being managed are often out of sight. Waste management facilities range from your local household waste recycling centre, what might be known as a TIP, through to vehicle breaking yards, and then major facilities like mechanical biological treatment facilities and incinerators, or otherwise known as energy from waste plants. All of these facilities need to fit into an integrated network with waste, including materials destined for recycling, travel to a number of places for sorting and reprocessing along the way. So what is the remit of the West London Waste Plan? What the Joint Waste Plan can do, it can identify locations appropriate for waste-related development in West London. It can set criteria to ensure the impacts from waste-related development are acceptable and development is of a high quality. It can specify what information should be included in planning applications for waste-related developments. And it can also release waste sites for redevelopment for other uses where a waste use is no longer appropriate on that site. And all of this is intended to attract and guide prospective developers to propose the right types of facilities in the right place at the right time through preparing planning applications that are considered by each of the local planning authorities represented on this call. What the West London Waste Plan doesn't do is it doesn't relate to the control of the operations of local waste collections, such as the frequency of bin collections. It doesn't specify who or which businesses or services providers occupy a waste site, nor does it influence the delivery of services beyond identifying where they should be located. And it can't make an existing operator leave an existing site. So just setting out now the sort of current position with regard to waste planning in West London. The extant West London Waste Plan was adopted in July 2015, and it plans through to 2031. So there's only 5 to 6 years left of planning through that plan. There is a national policy expectation that local plans should provide at least a 15-year coverage. The current West London Waste Plan was produced under the London Plan 2011, which is actually 2 iterations past. There's a changing policy landscape with regard to waste management and a very dynamic waste and resource market. So given the significant changes in the national and regional policy that have taken place since adoption in 2016, plus ongoing pressures on land in London, it was considered necessary to initiate a review of the existing plan, and this arrived at the conclusion that an update was required. So the process and considerations that have been taken into account in the formulation of the updated West London Waste Plan that is out to consultation at the moment are as follows. An assessment of management needs. So that meant looking at the quantities of waste that might arise and require management within West London, plus the quantities of waste that were allocated through the London Plan for management by each of the boroughs. We also undertook an assessment of the existing management capacity, and some of you who are on this call who represent operators may have actually been contacted in relation to that activity. Can be carried out a survey of operators to seek to verify the information that we'd gathered together. There's also development of vision, objectives and policies, and the visions and objectives developed were intended to reflect the local context of West London. The strategy that has been arrived at is based on evidence around future management needs and existing capacity to meet those needs. We also had an integrated impact assessment and habitats regulations assessment, which were undertaken by independent consultants LUC, and a strategic flood risk assessment that was also undertaken by an independent consultant known as Metis. Primary concern is to ensure that the updated West London Waste Plan is in general conformity with the London Plan, and that also it's consistent with national policy planning and waste policy. And through the process, we arrived at a strategy that was translated into 6 policies against which planning applications for waste-related development will be assessed and tested. And the independent integrated impact assessment was undertaken to ensure that the preferred strategy is the option that delivers the best outcomes for West London as a whole. We are aware that the London Plan is under review at the moment. It's not clear what implications this may have for the West London Waste Plan, so we're working to the current version of the London Plan, i.e. that of 2021. This slide sets out what many of you will probably be familiar with already, the waste hierarchy. This is by law, is to be applied in priority order, i.e. from the top down. So only unavoidable residual waste ends up either being burnt or buried. And this is actually regardless of whether some energy value can be recovered from the waste or not. And you can see at the top there, the priority is to prevent the creation of waste in the first place. Then we work down to reusing the item or material for a purpose. Then we work to recycling, which is probably what many of you might be most familiar with regard to waste management. And that's essentially taking the materials from the waste stream that can then be converted into new products. You then have recovery, which includes the burning of waste to extract the energy value from it and generate power and or heat that is then supplied off-site. And then finally, we have disposal, which is either landfill or incineration without energy recovery, and that's considered to be the last resort option. Moving back, if you recall, I mentioned earlier the fact that the London Plan allocates, or the term is often used, apportions specific tonnages of household, industrial and commercial waste to each London borough to ensure sufficient suitable capacity is provided so that London is net self-sufficient as a whole. These apportionments have changed over time with different versions of the London Plan, and this graph shows how this has occurred. The red line shows the levels of the apportionments against which the currently adopted West London Waste Plan was assessed, while the blue line shows the levels set in the current London Plan adopted in 2021. The orange line relates to a version of the London Plan, which is known as the Further Alterations to the London Plan, or FALP, that was actually undergoing consultation at the time the adopted West London Waste Plan was going through public examination. We are aware that the GLA, that's the Greater London Authority, is currently reviewing the apportionments for the next version of the London Plan that's undergoing preparation. So the apportionments that are shown on this graph may change as the updated West London Waste Plan goes through its process. However, the Regulation 18 version that is being consulted upon relies solely on the apportionments included in the currently adopted London Plan. This slide shows the combined tonnage of household, industrial and commercial waste that is allocated or portioned to the 6 West London boroughs. The Old Oak and Park Royal Development Corporation doesn't actually have its own apportionment. The apportionments change over time, the starting date being 2021 when the current London Plan was adopted, and the end date being 2041. As you can see there, there's an increase in the apportionment values between 21 and 41. These allocations have been made by the GLA based on an assessment of existing waste management capacity and the suitability of land within each London borough to potentially accommodate additional facilities if needed. It essentially shifts the burden of managing HIC waste from the inner London boroughs, which have limited land available, to outer London boroughs for management using particular qualifying methods that promote the movement of waste up the waste hierarchy. This is to achieve the overall objective of net self-sufficiency, and the table sets out the apportionments in line 1 and the outcome of a rigorous capacity assessment in line 2 that I referred to earlier. So taken together, these show that there is sufficient capacity in West London to ensure the apportionments will be provided for, and a surplus is available, and this will allow the release of a limited number of existing waste sites identified as managing this particular waste stream through the plan making process. So you can see here that the surplus capacity is the difference between the assessed capacity and the apportionment values in each case. And then we had in this case, a site that offers around about 18,500 tonnes per annum of capacity. So if we take this value away from those values, we get the remaining capacity surplus, and that represents about a third of headroom against the original apportionment. It's about necessary to maintain an amount of headroom to allow for the possibility of the apportionments changing, etc. Moving on to net self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency in terms of waste refers to the principle that each country should aim to manage and dispose of its own waste within its borders to the maximum extent possible. This encourages national governments to take responsibility for their own waste, and is designed to reduce the need for cross-boundary waste movements, which can create inequalities between countries. The principle applies at national level to England and Wales as a whole. The principle of net self-sufficiency has been adapted for local waste planning purposes to establish how much management capacity should be provided in each waste plan area. So through the addition of the term net, this recognises that the movements of waste occur between waste plan areas, as waste management is not generally confined to administrative areas. That's to say, other than perhaps with local authority collected waste, the actual day-to-day management of waste is controlled largely by the private sector, and they may transport waste in and out of West London in this particular case. Even in the case of local authority collected waste, contracts may allow that, and not all of that waste will necessarily be managed within West London in this case. These movements can be beneficial for optimizing the waste management system where economies of scale apply, and that this means that there's no expectation that each and every ton of waste produced in a particular plan area is to be managed within that plan area. Rather, that overall there should be a balance of provision, And the objective of net self-sufficiency is to ensure that there is sufficient capacity to manage the tonnage of waste equivalent to that predicted to arise within the plan area. The degree to which a plan area is net self-sufficient can be assessed by comparing the available capacity within a plan area with the projected capacity requirements. And a snapshot of the position for West London is presented in this graph, which is based on actual reported movements in 2023. So you can see here, for example, that the orange bars to the left of the axis are showing movements out of West London, and then the green and light blue bars are showing waste that is managed within West London. We can see that there's a significant reliance on the management of waste through landfill and also energy from waste and permanent deposit outside of West London, and that's because there are no non-inert landfills within West London, and nor are there any energy from waste plants. But in contrast, we do have a significant amount of treatment and recycling capacity within West London, which receives substantial tonnages from outside of West London for management, and also significant transfer capacity. We'll just add that whilst these classifications are based primarily on categorizations included in the Environment Agency's permitting register, they may not actually necessarily reflect what's actually taking place on each of the sites. And that's particularly true with regard to transfer, where in most cases there is some processing taking place on such sites. The London plan also applies a principle of net self-sufficiency to waste management across London as a whole. So, in light of the above evidence, the following plan strategy is proposed for the management of household, industrial and commercial waste in West London. The priority is to maintain sufficient qualifying capacity to meet the current London plan apportionment. And in this case, the London plan defines qualifying capacity as either waste is being used for energy recovery within London, or it's being used to produce solid recovered fuel or refuse-derived fuel that may be managed outside London, but that it has to be destined for energy recovery. It is sorted or bulked for reuse or for recycling within, well, that can actually happen outside London, but the sorting and bulking should happen within London. And that includes for anaerobic digestion, which is a form of treatment primarily used for food and organic waste, or it is actually being reused or recycled, including, again, anaerobic digestion within London itself. So in order to achieve that high level objective, the intention is to safeguard existing contributing capacity to a level in excess of the assessed need to provide the headroom that is considered necessary, to support provision of additional capacity where the need is identified or demonstrated, or would involve moving waste up the hierarchy, as I showed earlier, or to we also intend to restrict additional provision for the management of residual waste, and that's particularly bearing in mind that government has set a national target to halve the quantity of residual waste by 2042. There's no provision for landfill unless there is an overriding need demonstrated. And also, we will confirm the continued availability of management capacity for unavoidable residual waste, which is managed outside of West London, as the graph previously showed, via a mechanism referred to as the duty to cooperate. That essentially is contacting the waste planning authorities that host the particular facilities that the waste is being managed at, and seeking to confirm that the capacity that's being relied upon will be available for the planned period. Moving on to construction demolition waste and management targets. The London Plan doesn't assess quantities of waste that arise from construction and demolition activities in London, but it does set management targets for these waste streams. Therefore, in the absence of the London Plan at setting quantities, the West London planning authorities have undertaken their own assessment of tonnages of these waste produced in West London, and then use this assessment to assess the adequacy of current capacity in place so that the London Plan management targets will continue to be met. The outcome of these two exercises is presented in lines 1 and 2 of the table. So you can see that in 2026, the quantity of construction demolition waste forecast to arise was just over 1.1 million tonnes, rising to 1.3 million tonnes in 2041. The assessed capacity of existing waste sites to manage that waste in the appropriate way is 2.6 million tonnes and 2.5 million tonnes in 2041. The reason why the value for capacity in 2041 is less is because a number of the sites to which capacity was assessed actually only have temporary planning permissions and therefore are not expected to continue to be operating through to 2041. If we look at the line 3 of the table, this shows that if you take the forecast arisings away from the assessed capacity, you have a surplus of 1.4 million tonnes and 1.1 million tonnes respectively. And then, as mentioned previously, we have a number of sites that are proposed for release that together offer around about 210,000 tonnes of capacity for the management of this waste type. So taking that total away from the surpluses leaves us with a surplus of 1.2 million tonnes and just under 1 million tonnes in 2041, which is quite a significant surplus. So this surplus justifies and allows the release of a limited number of existing waste sites that are identified as managing this waste stream through the updated West London Waste Plan. So in light of the above evidence, the following strategy underpins the policy approach proposed for C&D waste in the updated West London Waste Plan under consultation. Primary objective is to maintain net self-sufficiency and management capacity, and this is to be achieved through safeguarding existing contributing capacity to a level in excess of the assessed need. Promote on-site recycling and reuse of waste where it rises. Support provision of additional capacity where the need is identified or demonstrated, or moving waste up the waste hierarchy. So those are the key 3 steps. Moving on to hazardous waste. Now, there's no policy requirement for individual plan areas to be net self-sufficient for the management of hazardous waste. Existing capacity to be safeguarded and additional capacity to be sought in cooperation with other plan areas. And as the London Plan states, the main requirement is for sites for regional facilities to be identified. Boroughs will need to work with neighbouring authorities to consider the necessary facilities when planning for their hazardous waste. It should also be noted that hazardous waste that arises in the household, industrial and commercial waste stream is actually already counted in the London Plan apportionment. So the assessment of need that we present in the next slide may actually have overestimated the tonnages requiring separate management to some extent. So we've undertaken a forecasting exercise. The London Plan doesn't assess quantities of hazardous waste in its own right. although as mentioned earlier, the hazardous component of household, industrial, commercial waste is included in the London Plan apportionment. So in the absence of a London Plan assessment, the West London planning authorities have undertaken their own assessment of tonnages of these wastes produced in West London, and then used these to assess the adequacy of current capacity in place to ensure sufficient capacity continues to be provided. So again, as before, the forecast arisings are presented in line 1 of the table. So just under 100,000 tonnes in 2026, but falling significantly by about half in 2041. And this is based on our assessment of individual waste streams and the tonnages that arise and the pressures and influences that will contribute towards whether they increase or decrease over time. Then the capacity has been assessed as standing at around about 130,000 tonnes per annum, and that has remained constant. We have a surplus of capacity in both cases, and there is one site proposed for release that manages hazardous waste, so deducting that, and that still shows that there is a surplus available. And this will ensure that there's sufficient capacity in West London to for the safe management of hazardous waste forecast to be produced going forward. So in light of the above evidence, the following strategy underpins the policy approach proposed for hazardous waste in the updated West London Waste Plan undergoing consultation. Safeguard existing contributing capacity to a level in excess of the assessed need, and confirm the continued availability of out of plan area capacity for waste requiring specialist management via the duty to cooperate, which I explained earlier. And then support provision of additional capacity where the need in London is identified or demonstrated. Moving on to the plan vision, which has been formulated by the local planning authorities for West London. They've identified the following key elements of a shared vision for the management of waste in West London through to 2041. We have an efficient and flexible use of safeguarded waste sites. Waste is managed as a resource. The network of facilities to manage at least an equivalent amount of waste produced. It will contribute to net self-sufficiency in London as a whole. There'll be a network of circular economy hubs. Carbon emissions associated with the management of waste will be minimised, and infrastructure will be resilient to climate change and will meet all the environmental standards in place. So from the vision, a number of objectives were then formulated. So the following shared objectives underpin the strategy and policies that are presented in the updated West London Plan that is currently undergoing consultation. To make best use of existing waste infrastructure, to manage waste efficiently, to encourage facilities that contribute to the achievement of circular economy to come forward, to decarbonise waste transport and waste processing, to deliver high quality waste management facilities and protect and enhance the environment and communities that host such facilities, and to ensure that sufficient capacity of the right type in the right place is available so that unavoidable residual waste is managed safely and effectively. Part of the plan strategy, as stated earlier, we reiterated the need to safeguard and optimise existing waste sites and capacity. And these are sites that have been based on their existing assessed contribution to the needed management capacity, and sites that have a lawful waste use under land use planning. A detailed site-by-site assessment has been undertaken, which is distilled in the listing in Appendix 2 of the updated West London Waste Plan that is out to consultation, plus maps of the boundary of each individual site to be safeguarded are included as Appendix 3. These maps have been prepared on the basis of best advice from the relevant local planning authority. And if anyone on this call has any additional local intelligence that you can add, then please input this through the consultation process. In addition to the sites that are proposed to be safeguarded, there's 6 sites have been identified for release based on the fact that each falls within an area earmarked for redevelopment through each of the local planning authorities' relevant local plan. And this is a table showing each of these sites. So within Hounslow, we have Unit A initial washrooms, and that is identified as being within an emerging site allocation. We have within the OPDC area Atlas Wharf, which is within a Channelgate Place policy and site allocation, and also the site formerly occupied by Quattro at Victoria Road, which is within North Acton and Acton Wells Place policy. And then within Brent, we have Mitre Works, Neasden Lane, land at Neasden Goods Yard in 2 cases, which are within the Neasden Station growth area. Now, the London plan states that any proposed release of current waste sites or those identified for future waste management capacity should be part of a plan-led process rather than done on an ad hoc basis. So these 6 sites have been identified by the West London local planning authorities as requiring release from their current waste use to allow wider development objectives for those locations to be achieved. The principle of their redevelopment has either already been accepted through the relevant local plan or is undergoing active consideration. As the capacity assessment has found capacity surpluses for the main site types, these surpluses are taken to be able to be offset the loss of capacity at the select number of sites identified, meaning that the plan's overall objective of maintaining net self-sufficiency in West London will not be put at risk through their release, and that's illustrated by the tables I've shown you earlier. However, a certain headroom of capacity has to be maintained to allow for future changes. Plus, the London plan expects that surpluses be offered to other London boroughs that might need them. So the overall objective of net self-sufficiency in London for waste management capacity is also achieved. This means that any release of sites must be properly controlled and justified. Now, moving on to the actual policies in the plan, which are, the core part or the primary means by which the updated West London Waste Plan will come into effect once adopted, as it's against those policies that planning applications for waste-related development will primarily be assessed. It is important to note that the plan is to be read as a whole and it forms part of the development plan for the particular area, so reference should also be made to other documents identified earlier as well. We have the WLWP1 policy, safeguarding and optimising the waste site network. That safeguard sites with planning consent and lawful uses as listed in Appendix 2. That policy also supports the intensification and movement of waste up the hierarchy, and it includes criteria for the release of safeguarded waste sites for non-waste uses. WLWP2 relates to the provision of additional waste management capacity, and that's supported where criteria are met, such as need, the waste hierarchy, circular economy, and the location, along with industrial, transport, amenity, and environment considerations. Material exchanges on major development sites are supported. Then WLWP3 relates to residual waste management and energy recovery. And That requires that need and no other options are available, plus proximity and no conflict with recycling. Energy recovery to make use of heat and decentralized energy, minimize emissions and recover any residues that are produced. WLWP4 relates to ensuring high quality and resilient waste facilities. They should be of sustainable design, minimize amenity and environmental impacts. They should be resilient to climate change, minimize greenhouse gases, and recover residual wastes. We have WLWP5, which relates to recovery and disposal to land. And that covers both the deposit of waste for beneficial purposes using the minimum amount necessary where it's not practical to recycle the waste. Disposal otherwise will be resisted unless there's an overriding need that's been demonstrated. And finally, WLWP6, circular economy and resource efficiency. This supports the transition to a low carbon economy, and materials are managed as high up the waste hierarchy as possible. And the circular economy principles are put into effect. Moving on to the timeline, there is a tight timeline that's been worked to submit by the cut-off date of December 2026, when the government has announced its intention to switch to a new plan-making regime. This today and the current consultation where we are now, as shown on this timeline, is the first of two opportunities to influence the update of the West London Waste Plan. The second opportunity will be in 2026 at what is called the Regulation 19 stage. All representations received from this consultation will be logged, and a schedule will be produced showing how each and every comment has been assessed and taken account of in the next version of the updated West London Waste Plan. This schedule and the revised updated West London Waste Plan will be available in the public domain around Easter of next year. So it does hopefully emphasize your views are important. Please share them. The consultation documents that are available for you to download and view is the draft updated West London Waste Plan, the integrated impact assessment and scoping report, the habitat regulations assessment, the strategic flood risk assessment, topic papers related to climate change, circular economy and waste management, and then a series of technical background reports that we produce to help inform as the evidence base the strategy that was adopted. And we recommend that if you have time to read through them all and provide feedback or raise any questions you may have. The West London Waste Planning Authorities have adopted a joint protocol. So this consultation is being run in accordance with the protocol that's been agreed by all of the West London planning authorities. This draws on the statements of community involvement each local planning authority has adopted, reflecting best practice and public engagement. It is also available to view on the public consultation website. And there will be a series of events. This is the first of a number of events that will be taking place during the consultation period. So how to comment? The documents are available online. Printed copies are also available at main offices and selected venues, including libraries across West London. You can respond to the consultation in the following ways. You can go online and take the survey, click the button. You can download and email a response form. You can also print off printed copies and post them to this address. And comments are required by midnight on Thursday, the 5th of February. Please respond. Your views are important to us, and as stated earlier, all will be assessed and taken account of in the development of the updated West London Waste Plan. So this concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll hand you back to Anthony. Thank you for your attention.